New South Wales Swifts may be out of contention for the finals, but their promise to make life tough for the remaining hopefuls is certainly ringing true. A 9-goal win over the Melbourne VIXENS, one of the upsets of the season. Defending champions the Magic and former champions the FIREBIRDS gather some serious momentum. While over in the West, Norma Plummer is furious at her team's poor performances over the past couple of weeks. As I say hello and welcome to Centre Pass, the official video podcast of the ANZ Championship. Dan Ryan here alongside former Australian skipper Catherine Harby-Williams. And Kath, perhaps the biggest talking point of last round was the slip-up of the VIXENS, that shock loss to the New South Wales Swifts.
Yeah, well, isn't it fascinating, Dan? They do all the hard work against the FIREBIRDS the week before where they were really impressive, and then they've come back and the Swifts, in support of what they've done, they are in good form now, and it's a shame that they didn't find that form much earlier in the season. But the VIXENS just have a few inconsistencies, so that was a big loss for them. And I guess on the other hand, the FIREBIRDS, who suffered the loss at the expense of the VIXENS, have now come out, and we all say you learn a lot more from a loss than a win, and the FIREBIRDS showed that with their dominating performance against the Fever.
Yeah, absolutely. Time now to reflect back on all of the results from round 12 of the competition. In one of the biggest upsets of the season, as we mentioned, the New South Wales Swifts brought the Melbourne VIXENS crashing down to earth with a 9-goal win in Melbourne. The FIREBIRDS put the competition on notice with a dominant display against the West Coast Fever, winners 72-47. The Steel scored 79 goals to defeat the TACTIX with 62 goals, setting a new record with the total number of goals scored in an ANZ Championship game. And the Magic had to fight off a much improved Northern Mystics outfit, taking a 10-goal win in Auckland, 60-50. The Thunderbirds and the Pulse having the bye. As we take a look at the competition ladder as it stands now after 12 rounds of the competition, all teams, Catherine, having played 11 games. The FIREBIRDS, the big movers, up into second after that win.
Yeah, and it looks like they will stay there. They've found some good form, but a few interesting things about that table. Thunderbirds have never finished top, even when they won their premiership. They finished second at the end of the minor round. The premiership curse, if the Magic make the top four, they will be the first team who have won the premiership to go on and make the top four and compete for a finals berth the year after. But the interesting one is, if that top four remains the same, we will have the first dual champion team of the competition. No one has ever won 2 titles. So history in the making for one of those sides.
Certainly is history on the line in the ANZ Championship. We now turn our attention to round 13 of the competition, the second last round before the final series. A big game to kick us off in Brisbane on Sunday will be the Queensland FIREBIRDS, currently ranked second, up against the 8th place New South Wales Swifts. Ranking aside, the Swifts, one of the informed teams at the moment. This is an opportunity for the FIREBIRDS to consolidate that second place on the ladder.
Yes, it is. So you'd think that that would be reason enough for them to win the game, but they, I think, would have preferred to come up against the Swifts a few weeks ago when they were struggling for form. But for me, the Swifts, their good form comes on the back of some really good defence. McCloma's been MVP in the last 2 games. Gerard has played some games at a level that we haven't seen for a number of years from her. You know, Jawocki's supporting Prattley really well, so it's a danger game. So the matchup, I think, McCloma-Gerard versus Aitken and Medhurst is the one to look out for. Whoever gets on top in that duel, I think, will win the game.
These two sides met back in round 4 and it was an 8-goal win to the Queensland FIREBIRDS. That game was played in Sydney. Kim Green didn't play for the Swifts last week when they beat the VIXENS, so a huge score for the Swifts to get over the line. Paige Hadley stepped up into that centre position. If Green isn't back this week, we could see Paige Hadley against Kim Revillion, potentially the next generation of Australian netball as they're going head to head.
And I think Australian netball will be pretty happy because I think those players certainly are the future of the mid-court for Australia. They're fine talents and they've got the mental application, I think, to make sure that they are going to have long and successful careers. So yeah, really good matchup there, but I expect if Green is right from her hamstring injury that she'll come in because she's a co-captain, she adds some grunt, and the Swifts certainly need that in a big game like this.
Our next game on Sunday afternoon will be the Adelaide Thunderbirds hosting the Northern Mystics, of course, top versus bottom here on the ladder. The Thunderbirds coming off the bye last week, but this is an important one for the Thunderbirds. They win this game and they assure themselves the minor premiership, as you mentioned before, something they've never done before.
No, and they're on an absolute roll, but sometimes it's a little bit of a danger game when you come off the bye, and I think their season is set up perfectly. They're coming off the bye, they're up against, you know, a side that's really struggling, so they'll be able to get some momentum going into the last game of the season when they meet the FIREBIRDS. So the Thunderbirds, I think, will want to consolidate a win and try and get some decent percentage on the board and just some good solid form because they've had a lot of close games this year. So I think they'd like to actually feel comfortable and show that they are really strong performers, particularly against the lesser sides.
Certainly they'll be buoyed too with the return of Natalie Von Berto, who missed a couple of weeks ago with a finger injury.
Yeah, she'll be happy to be back. God, hasn't she suffered some injuries over the last couple of years? But yes, her fingers are causing her great havoc. But just got engaged.
She did. in.
And we all know, particularly for the female Dan, it's a very exciting time of your life, and she will lift to a level that we haven't seen from her probably for most part of the season. So expect a big game from Von Berto.
Looking forward to that one of the Thunderbirds hosting the Northern Mystics. Our next game on Sunday will be in New Zealand. It will be an absolute blockbuster. The Magic, the defending champions, hosting the Melbourne Vixens. This is a rematch of the grand final last year. We know the result there. The Magic were the winners on Melbourne's home soil. This is a huge game for both teams, third versus fourth.
Yeah, hard to tip actually. And the Magic is still a chance to move up from that fourth position. So they'll be very keen for the win. Having it at home benefits them greatly. The Vixens not so great last week, but it's interesting because the Magic have run the same 7 for 3 weeks in a row. When they were on a roll last year, they had no subs for the last 7 matches, and we know they went on to win the premiership. So, there's all this rotation policy, etc. But look at the Magic. When they're successful, they are playing a very, very settled lineup. So that's what we'll see from them. The question mark for the Vixens is when they're at their peak, they are, I think, the best team in the competition, but they just have some inconsistencies, and oddly enough, it's in their attacking game, and that's where they've got the options of Caldwell, Howarth and McMahon, but there are just times when that forward line doesn't function well. I don't know if it's because there's too much pressure on the starting goalers because they know that someone's breathing down their neck like McMahon, or what it is. So that's just the only, I guess, question mark for the Vixens for me.
The fact that this game's played in New Zealand, how much of an advantage does that give the Magic in this one?
Yeah. Well, when it comes to my tipping, if that means anything, I've gone for the Magic simply for that reason. So I guess that answers your question. They are a different team on home soil, and we all know how hard it is for the New Zealand sides to win in Australia. And also at the same time, I think they found good form. They're on a roll. We know Tarua, their coach, is going out this season. They're showing similar signs to last year, so they are certainly the danger team at the moment.
Plenty to play for in that game, probably the biggest game of the round there. The Magic hosting the Melbourne Vixens. Monday night netball starts in Perth with the West Coast Fever hosting the Southern Steel. The Fever out of the contention for finals, of course. We know they've been given a serve from their coach Norma Plummer, who's certainly not happy with the performances from a few of their players over the past couple of weeks, so they're certainly on notice in terms of contracts for the years coming ahead. But the Southern Steel, they're still mathematically a chance to make the final, so they need to create some history and win a game in Australia.
Yeah, and then that's the biggest challenge for them. We know at home that they will be good enough, and I'd probably tip them at home. Travelling to Perth is a different story for teams from New Zealand, particularly from Invercargill. Janelle Fowler, 65 goals. I like my stats. I found one very interesting stat. That Fowler is 9 goals short of the total Thunderbirds score for the entire season.
That is incredible.
It's amazing. So it just goes to show they need to shut down the feed into Fowler. They really struggled defensively last week. Yes, Norma Plummer has put her players on notice, so we'll see how they react to that. It's a hard game to pick. The Fever, 27 turnovers last week, and that's what frustrated Plummer. She said, I don't mind if they're competitive and they have a go, but when they make basic errors, I can't teach that. It's not what I'm here for. I'm here to create a championship winning side, and when you don't have the basics, it's pretty hard to do. So it'll be interesting to see how they react from her spray.
Absolutely. That is the West Coast Fever up against the Southern Steel. Final game of the round is the Central Pulse up against the Canterbury Tactics. Pretty straightforward here. The Central Pulse, still another team, mathematically a chance to make the finals. Perhaps a little bit difficult from here on in, but they must win. They must win well.
Yeah, look, they've had a historical season. They've won more games this year than any other year, so that's a positive. But I think deep down, they wanted to play finals netball this year. So yes, there's still a mathematical chance. So they'll want to win this one and win it well to finish off the season on a good note. And who knows, in this competition, things could fall their way. Sort of the Bradbury of the netball world. But we'll see. They're in decent form. They've had a solid season, so they should be satisfied with where they're at without being totally excited about their
perhaps that controversial loss to the Mystic now starts to rear its
talk
head.
about it.
That's right. Well, Catherine, time now to do your tips. You had a good round again. You're still trailing by 2. Take us through the tips for round 13 of the competition.
Okay, usually I go for the favourite, so this time I'm going to change tack and go for the informed side. So I'm going for the Swifts over the Firebirds, who are also informed. So I don't know why, probably because you're going to tip the Firebirds. Thunderbirds obviously over the Mystics. Magic versus Vixens. Magic are informed, so I'm going for them at home. This next one, there's some hard ones this week. Fever over the Steel, simply because it is in Australia, and Pulse over the Tactics.
All right, Kath, well, if you get 5 out of 5, you're going to take, we potentially could tie this competition up. I'm backing the Firebirds, too strong for the Swifts at home. Thunderbirds to wrap up the minor premiership against the Mystics. The Vixens to beat the Magic in a thriller, because when the Vixens get beaten, they bounce back strongly. So that's what I'm expecting from the Melbourne side. The Fever over the Steel, and the Pulse over the Canterbury Tactics. Well, that is all we have time for this week's episode of Centre Pass. Thank you very much for joining us. Catherine, thank you for all your insights once again. Make sure you check out the ANZ Champs website for all of the broadcast details for round 13 of the competition. Until next time, goodbye for now.